Lily trembled as she held the ancient silver locket in her small hands, dirt still clinging to its edges. Behind her, 8-year-old Ethan Blackwood rose from his wheelchair for the first time in his life, while his billionaire father collapsed to his knees screaming. I know you're wondering how this incredible moment came to be. Before we dive into this shocking story, tell us where you're watching from in the comments. Hit that like button and subscribe if you're ready to uncover the dark secrets hidden behind the walls of one of America's wealthiest families. Now let's rewind to where it all began. Maxwell Blackwood surveyed his sprawling 20-acre estate from the floor to ceiling windows of his home office, his cold blue eyes reflecting nothing of the beautiful Connecticut summer morning. At 34, the tech billionaire had everything money could buy: the finest mansion in affluent Westlake, a fleet of luxury cars and business connections that reached the highest levels of power. But money couldn't fix the one thing that haunted him day and night. His 8-year-old son, Ethan, born paralyzed from the waist, down, a constant reminder of the wife he had lost during childbirth. Maxwell rarely visited the East Wing, where Ethan's specially equipped rooms were located, preferring to bury himself in work, rather than face the boy whose existence he both treasured and resented. When they did interact, Maxwell maintained a clinical distance, speaking to his son as one might address a business associate rather than a child starving for affection. Your physical therapy report shows no improvement again this quarter, he told Ethan during their weekly scheduled meeting, reviewing the boy's medical file without meeting his eyes. We'll continue with the current treatment protocol. Ethan, a small boy with sandy blonde hair, and his mother's gentle features, simply nodded, having learned years ago that his father had no interest in his thoughts or feelings. The mansion operated like a well-oiled machine maintained by a staff of 20 who knew better than to speak unless spoken to. At the center of this invisible workforce was Mrs. Rosetta Washington, the head housekeeper who had loyally served the Blackwood family for 12 years. A dignified black woman in her early 40s, Rosetta managed the household with quiet efficiency, becoming more of a mother figure to young Ethan than Maxwell had ever acknowledged. During summer break, Rosetta's 7-year-old daughter Lily often accompanied her to work, staying out of sight in the servants' quarters, as per Maxwell's strict instructions. Remember, Lily Rosetta reminded her daughter each morning as they passed through the service entrance. You must never disturb Mr. Blackwood or enter the main house. We need this job. Lily, a bright-eyed child with braided hair and a curious spirit that constantly got her into trouble, nodded solemnly. She understood more than most children her age that their livelihood depended on her mother keeping this position. Despite 12 years of impeccable service, Rosetta struggled to make ends meet. When she cautiously approached Maxwell about healthcare benefits for the staff or a modest raise to cover Lily's school supplies, his response was always the same, a dismissive wave followed by, "If you're unhappy with your compensation, Mrs. Washington, there are plenty of others who would gladly take your position." The unspoken reality hung in the air between them. As a black single mother without a college degree, Rosetta's employment options were limited in a town where old money and older prejudices ran deep. One particularly hot July afternoon, while Rosetta was busy organizing the mansion's quarterly deep cleaning, Lily grew bored in the stuffy servants' quarters. Slipping out to find her mother, she took a wrong turn down one of the mansion's identical marble hallways and accidentally entered the main house. Following the sound of television, she pushed open a door and found herself in a sunlit playroom filled with toys that looked brand new but untouched. In the center, positioned before a massive flat screen, sat Ethan in his custom wheelchair, watching a nature documentary with a forlorn expression. The two children froze, staring at each other in mutual surprise. Ethan recovered first, his face lighting up at the sight of another child. "Hello," he said cautiously, as if afraid she might disappear. "Are you real?" Lily giggled despite her nervousness. "Of course I'm real. I'm Lily. My mom works here." She glanced around at the mountains of unopened toys. "Don't you play with any of this stuff." Ethan shook his head, embarrassed. "Dad says I should focus on educational content." "Who wants to play alone anyway?" Something in his voice, the resignation, the loneliness, struck a chord with Lily. Despite knowing she could get her mother in trouble, she stepped fully into the room and picked up a remote-controlled car. "Want a race?" she asked, and Ethan's face transformed with a joy that had been absent for years. Over the next few weeks, the children established a secret routine. When Rosetta was occupied with her most demanding tasks, Lily would sneak into Ethan's rooms. They played board games, built elaborate Lego structures, and shared stories. Lily about her adventures at public school, and Ethan about the endless parade of doctors who prodded and examined him without ever looking him in the eye. During one of these clandestine play sessions, Ethan confided something that had been weighing on him. "The doctors never found why I can't walk," he whispered, as if sharing a forbidden secret. "Dad says I was born this way after Mom died, but sometimes." He trailed off, looking around fearfully despite the room being empty. Lily leaned closer. "Sometimes," what Ethan's voice dropped even lower. "Sometimes I feel tingling in my legs, like they're waking up. But when I told Dad once, he got really angry and doubled my medicine. He said it was just my imagination trying to deny reality." Lily frowned. "What medicine do you take?" Ethan pointed to a small locked cabinet. "Special vitamins, every morning and night. They make me feel foggy sometimes, but Dad says they're essential for my condition." The friendship blossomed in these stolen moments, giving both children something they desperately needed. For Lily, a glimpse into a world of privilege she could never access. For Ethan, his first taste of normal childhood connection. For the first time since he could remember, Ethan began looking forward to each day, counting the hours, until Lily might appear in his doorway with a mischievous grin and a new game to play. The carefully constructed routine came crashing down on a stormy August afternoon. Maxwell Blackwood, returning early from a business trip due to a canceled meeting, decided to check on his son, a rare occurrence that unfortunately coincided with one of Lily and Ethan's play sessions. The sound of children's laughter led him to the playroom, where he found Ethan out of his wheelchair, propped up on cushions on the floor, while he and Lily built an elaborate card castle. Maxwell's face contorted with rage, his usual composed demeanor shattering. "What is the meaning of this?" he thundered, causing both children to jump in fright, toppling their creation. "Ethan, you know you're not supposed to leave your chair without assistance. And who authorized this intrusion?" His gaze fixed on Lily with such contempt that she instinctively backed away. "I'm sorry, Mr. Blackwood," she stammered. "We were just playing." Maxwell ignored her, pressing the intercom button on the wall with unnecessary force. "Mrs. Washington to the East Wing, immediately." The minutes that followed were excruciating. Ethan, pale and trembling, was roughly returned to his wheelchair by his father, who lectured him about safety protocols and unnecessary risks while shooting venomous glances at Lily. When Rosetta arrived, slightly out of breath from rushing across the mansion, Maxwell's cold fury shifted to her. "Mrs. Washington, I find your daughter unsupervised in my son's private quarters. Explain yourself." Rosetta's face fell as she saw Lily shrinking against the wall. "Mr. Blackwood, I had no idea. Lily is supposed to remain in the staff area. I assure you this won't happen again." Maxwell straightened his bespoke suit jacket, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "You're right, it won't. Pack your things. You're terminated effective immediately." The color drained from Rosetta's face. "Please, Mr. Blackwood," she pleaded, her voice cracking. "I'm a single mother. This job is all we have. I've served your family faithfully for 12 years. Should I be impressed by your mediocre tenure?" Maxwell sneered. "The rules were simple. Keep your child away from mine. You failed." Tears welled in Rosetta's eyes, but she refused to let them fall in front of this man. "Sir, please reconsider. I have no savings, no other prospects. Lily's school year starts in 3 weeks. I'll ensure she never enters the main house again." Something calculated flickered in Maxwell's eyes as he considered the desperation before him. After a long, tense silence, he nodded curtly. "Very well. One more chance. But your pay will be reduced by 20% for 3 months as a reminder of your failure. And if I ever see your daughter anywhere near my son again, you'll both be out on the street without references. Is that clear?" Rosetta's shoulders sagged with both relief and humiliation. "Yes, Mr. Blackwood. Thank you for your generosity." As they were leaving, Ethan called out, It wasn't Mrs. Washington's fault. I invited Lily to play. I was lonely. Maxwell turned to his son with a coldness that made everyone in the room shiver. We'll discuss your behavior later, Ethan. You know better than to associate with the help's children. Later that same week, as Lily helped her mother fold laundry in the basement service area, raised voices echoed down the ventilation shaft. Curious, she followed the sound and found herself near Maxwell's study, where the door stood slightly ajar. Inside, a gray-haired man in a doctor's coat was facing off with Maxwell. This is the third specialist who suggested alternative approaches. Max, the doctor, was saying, his frustration evident. Ethan's condition doesn't match any known congenital paralysis pattern. We should explore psychological factors, perhaps even experimental treatments. I didn't hire you to question my son's diagnosis, Doctor. Thornton Maxwell replied icily. I hired you to manage his care according to my specifications. Dr. Thornton shook his head. I've been your family physician for 15 years, since before Victoria's pregnancy. I delivered that boy. As a doctor and your friend, I'm telling you we're missing something crucial here. Maxwell's voice dropped to a dangerous whisper. And I'm telling you that your services are no longer required. Security will escort you out. Max, listen to yourself, Dr. Thornton protested. Victoria would never have wanted. Don't you dare speak her name, Maxwell shouted, slamming his fist on the desk. Get out before I have you blacklisted from every medical facility in New England. Lily ducked into an alcove as the doctor stormed past, muttering about malpractice and something not right about this whole situation. That evening, when Lily shared what she'd overheard with her mother, Rosetta looked troubled, but warned her daughter against spreading gossip. It's not our place to question Mr. Blackwood's decisions regarding his son, she said firmly, though her eyes reflected doubt. But Mom, Lily persisted. Ethan told me he sometimes feels his legs. What if he's not really paralyzed? Rosetta busied herself with folding sheets, avoiding her daughter's gaze. Lily, stop. Mr. Blackwood has consulted the finest specialists in the country. Besides, we can't afford to lose this job. Promise me you'll stay away from Ethan and mind your own business. Lily reluctantly promised, but her curiosity only intensified. The next day, she witnessed something that convinced her something was deeply wrong at the Blackwood estate. From her hiding place behind a topiary in the garden, she watched Maxwell overseeing Ethan's physical therapy session on the terrace. The therapist suggested trying a new standing frame that might stimulate nerve response. Mr. Blackwood, there's been promising research with cases like Ethan's. Children previously thought permanently paralyzed have shown improvement with aggressive therapy. Ethan's face lit up with hope, but Maxwell quickly extinguished it. My son has accepted his condition, he interrupted sharply. I won't have you giving him false hope with unproven methods. When the therapist persisted, Maxwell terminated the session early, dismissing the man with a wave of his hand. As the therapist packed up his equipment, Ethan looked at his father with unusual defiance. Dad, what if I want to try? What if I could get better? Maxwell's expression hardened. Ethan, we've been through this. Your condition is permanent. The sooner you accept that reality, the better off you'll be. The devastation on Ethan's face stirred something protective in Lily. Despite the risks, she continued visiting him in secret, now more determined than ever to bring some joy into his controlled existence. She smuggled library books about children overcoming disabilities, inspiring Ethan with stories of resilience and possibility. Each visit required elaborate planning, tracking staff movements, creating diversions, and using the mansion's service passages to avoid detection. For Ethan, these visits became a lifeline. For the first time, he had a friend who saw him as a person, not a medical condition or a burden. For the first time, he began to question the narrative that had defined his entire life. Have you ever had that feeling that something just isn't right? That nagging suspicion that important pieces of a puzzle are being deliberately hidden from view? That's exactly what Lily Washington experienced on a golden September afternoon while playing an improvised game of hide-and-seek on the vast Blackwood estate grounds. Evading the gardeners and security cameras had become second nature to the resourceful 7-year-old as she made her way to her latest hiding spot, a dense thicket of rhododendrons near the property's eastern boundary. As she pushed through the scratchy branches, Lily suddenly found herself in a clearing she'd never noticed before. Before her stood an overgrown garden, unlike any other part of the meticulously maintained estate. Where the rest of the grounds featured manicured lawns and precisely trimmed hedges, this forgotten corner had been allowed to grow wild with climbing roses tangling around crumbling stone benches and wisteria vines claiming abandoned trellises. But what captured Lily's attention wasn't the untamed beauty. It was the structure at the center of the garden. A Victorian-style greenhouse stood like a secret jewel among the greenery, its windows mysteriously blacked out with what appeared to be dark paint or fabric. A heavy padlock secured its ornate iron door, suggesting whatever lay inside was not meant for casual discovery. Curiosity overwhelmed caution. As Lily approached the structure, her heart racing with each step. Finding a small section where the blacking had peeled away, she pressed her eye to the glass. What she glimpsed inside made little sense to her young mind. Strange plants with unusual colored blooms lined sophisticated-looking metal tables, while complicated equipment reminiscent of her school's science lab occupied the center of the space. Glass vials and containers were carefully arranged on shelves labeled with symbols and codes she couldn't decipher. Before she could investigate further, the distant sound of voices sent her scrambling back through the rhododendrons, her mind buzzing with questions. That evening, while helping Ethan with a jigsaw puzzle during one of her secret visits, Lily mentioned her discovery. "I found a weird greenhouse today, all locked up with the windows painted black. It's hidden in a garden nobody takes care of." The reaction from the normally composed boy startled her. Ethan's puzzle piece clattered to the table as his eyes widened with recognition. "You found Mom's garden," he whispered, glancing nervously at his bedroom door. "Dad never lets anyone go there." Lily leaned forward, intrigued. "Your mom's garden? I thought she died when you were born." Ethan nodded, his voice dropping even lower. "She did. She was a botanist. That means she studied plants. Dad said she was brilliant, discovering new medicines from rare species. That greenhouse was her special laboratory." He fidgeted with the puzzle piece, turning it over repeatedly in his fingers. "Sometimes I have dreams about it, even though I was just a baby when she died. Dad says I'm imagining things, but I remember colors and smells, and her voice." The wistful longing in his tone broke Lily's heart. "Has your dad kept it just like she left it? As a memorial or something?" she asked. Ethan shrugged. "I don't know. He never talks about it except to say it's strictly forbidden. No one is allowed inside. Not the gardeners, not the housekeepers, not even me." The next afternoon, determined to learn more about the mysterious greenhouse, Lily positioned herself near the kitchen window that overlooked the path leading to the hidden garden. Her patience was rewarded when she spotted Maxwell Blackwood himself, striding purposefully toward the overgrown area, a sleek silver briefcase clutched in his hand. Despite her mother's warnings echoing in her mind, Lily slipped out the service entrance and followed at a safe distance, ducking behind trees and shrubs whenever Maxwell glanced over his shoulder. She watched as he unlocked the greenhouse, entered, and closed the door behind him. For nearly an hour he remained inside while Lily waited, mosquitoes feasting on her exposed arms and legs. When he finally emerged, locking the door securely behind him, his expression was unreadable, but his movements seemed oddly hurried. Something compelled Lily to continue her surveillance. She tracked Maxwell back to the main house, where he immediately locked himself in his study. Pressing her ear against the door, she caught fragments of a phone conversation that made little sense to her. The formula remains stable. Yes, everything continues according to plan. The status quo must be maintained at all costs. No, there won't be any changes to our arrangement. Do you think Maxwell was hiding something sinister in that greenhouse? Comment number 1, if you believe he was protecting a dark family secret, or number 2, if you think he was simply preserving his late wife's research. Like this video if you've ever discovered something mysterious that turned out to be important. Subscribe to our channel for more shocking true stories of secrets hidden in plain sight. Meanwhile, back at the Blackwood estate, tensions were escalating below stairs. Rosetta had begun noticing troubling patterns in how the household was run. The white staff members received preferential treatment, Better schedules, higher pay, more comfortable break areas, while the few other people of color on staff were consistently assigned the most difficult and demeaning tasks. When Garcia, the groundskeeper, with 20 years of experience, requested time off for his daughter's wedding, he was denied without explanation. Yet the young white assistant chef was granted 2 weeks vacation after just 6 months of employment. After witnessing one too many such incidents, Rosetta gathered her courage and requested a meeting with Maxwell. Standing rigidly in his study, she professionally outlined the disparities she'd observed and suggested more equitable policies. Maxwell's response chilled her to the bone. "Mrs. Washington," he said, leaning back in his leather chair with casual disdain, "you seem to be under the misapprehension that this is a democracy rather than my private home. You're lucky to have a job at all in this economy, especially given your limited qualifications." His gaze flicked meaningfully to her dark skin. "Perhaps you've forgotten that your cousin Maria in the kitchen lacks proper documentation. It would be unfortunate if ICE were to conduct a surprise inspection of my staff's papers." The threat hung in the air between them. Rosetta left the meeting with her dignity intact, but her spirit crushed, knowing she was powerless against a man who wielded his privilege and wealth like weapons. That night, as she braided Lily's hair before bed in their tiny room in the servants' wing, Rosetta struggled to hide her distress. Perceptive as always, Lily asked what was wrong. "Nothing." Baby Rosetta sighed, attempting a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Just grown-up problems." Lily turned to face her mother, her expression unusually serious. "It's not fair how Mr. Blackwood treats people, is it? Especially people who look like us." Rosetta paused, torn between her instinct to protect her daughter from harsh realities and her desire to raise a child who understood the truth. "Life isn't always fair, Lily," she finally said. "Some people have power and use it poorly. Our job is to maintain our dignity and do what's right no matter how others behave." Lily absorbed this, then shared her new theory. "Mom, I think the greenhouse has something to do with Ethan. He said his mom was creating medicines there, and now he takes special vitamins every day that make him feel weird." Rosetta frowned. "Lily, whatever is going on with Ethan's health is not our business. Mr. Blackwood has the resources to provide the best care possible for his son." "But what if he's not?" Lily persisted. "What if those medicines are hurting Ethan, instead of helping him, Doctor? Thornton thought something was wrong too, and Mr. Blackwood fired him." Rosetta's expression grew troubled. While she'd trained as a nurse before discrimination in healthcare pushed her toward domestic work, she'd never been privy to Ethan's medical details. Still, she'd occasionally wondered about the constant stream of specialists who never seemed to agree on a treatment plan and the way Maxwell tightly controlled all aspects of his son's care. "Lily," she said, "finally promise me you won't do anything reckless. Mr. Blackwood is a powerful man, and we can't afford to cross him. Let me think about this situation." But even as she cautioned her daughter, Rosetta couldn't shake the feeling that something deeply wrong was happening at the Blackwood estate. And neither could Lily, who lay awake long into the night plotting how she might uncover the secrets of the mysterious greenhouse. "What do you think is inside that greenhouse? Is it connected to Ethan's condition? How far would a billionaire go to protect his secrets? The answers might shock you more than you could possibly imagine." The perfect opportunity presented itself 2 weeks later when Maxwell Blackwood hosted his annual charity gala, an extravagant affair where Connecticut's elite gathered to sip champagne, write tax-deductible checks, and congratulate themselves on their philanthropy. With the mansion transformed into a glittering showcase and the staff fully occupied catering to hundreds of guests, security around the property's perimeter loosened considerably. Lily had carefully observed Maxwell's routine during the previous days, noting that he always kept the greenhouse key in the top drawer of his study desk. With her mother assigned to oversee the catering staff in the grand ballroom, Lily seized her chance. Slipping through the service corridors like a shadow, she made her way to Maxwell's study, thankfully empty as he greeted guests in the foyer. Heart pounding wildly in her chest, she carefully opened the desk drawer and found a small brass key attached to a tag labeled simply VG. Victoria's greenhouse, she presumed. Pocketing her prize, Lily retreated to the servants' quarters to wait for Phase 2 of her improvised plan. As the evening progressed and the party reached its peak, Lily made her way to Ethan's room, knowing his evening nurse would be helping serve refreshments. She found him sitting by his window watching the parade of limousines and luxury cars arriving in the circular driveway below. "Want to go on an adventure," she whispered, showing him the key. Ethan's eyes widened. "My dad will kill us if he catches us," he whispered back, but the excitement in his voice betrayed his true feelings. "We won't get caught," Lily promised with more confidence than she felt. "Everyone's busy with the party. Don't you want to see your mom's special place?" The question settled it. Within minutes, Lily was pushing Ethan's wheelchair through the less-traveled garden paths, using the commotion of the gala as cover. The journey took longer than anticipated, with Ethan's wheelchair struggling over the uneven ground and through the overgrown sections. Several times they had to stop and work together to navigate particularly difficult terrain. During one such pause, Ethan closed his eyes, concentrating. "I think I remember this path," he said softly. "Mom used to carry me here when I was tiny. There was a bird bath." He pointed to the right, and sure enough, a cracked stone bird bath appeared among the tangled vegetation. And then the big oak with the swing. Another correct prediction. Lily stared at him in amazement. "But you were just a baby when she died." "How can you remember?" Ethan shook his head, confused. "I don't know. It's like flashes of pictures in my head. Dad always said I was making it up, that I couldn't possibly remember her." When they finally reached the greenhouse, both children were breathing hard from exertion and anticipation. The key slid into the padlock with a satisfying click, and the heavy door swung open with a creak that seemed to echo across the years. Inside, the air was warm and humid, smelling of earth and green things. Emergency lights provided a dim illumination, revealing workbenches lined with exotic plants, many of which neither child could identify. Careful not to disturb anything, they ventured further in. "Look," Ethan whispered, pointing to a bookshelf filled with leather-bound journals. Lily helped him reach one, and they opened it to discover page after page of handwritten notes, complex chemical formulas, and detailed botanical drawings. Victoria Blackwood's elegant script filled the margins with observations and questions. March 15th, Ethan read aloud from an entry dated 8 years earlier. "Breakthrough with compound NR27. Neural pathway stimulation unprecedented in preliminary tests. This could revolutionize treatment for paralysis patients if developed correctly. Must proceed with caution. Too important to rush." They flipped through more journals, piecing together the story of Victoria's work. She had been developing a plant-based neural stimulant that showed promise for treating various forms of paralysis, allowing damaged nerves to regenerate and restore function. The final entries, dated just before her supposed death, took on a darker tone. "Maxwell insists on patenting the formula immediately, but I'm concerned about accessibility. This treatment shouldn't be reserved only for those who can afford it. We've argued about this repeatedly. His pharmaceutical contacts are pushing for exclusive distribution rights at prices that would make it unavailable to most patients. This wasn't why I started this research." The last entry was particularly disturbing. "I fear someone is tampering with my samples. Measurements are off and some test results don't match my original findings. Maxwell dismisses my concerns, but I've begun keeping duplicate records and samples off-site. If anything happens to me, Thomas at the university has copies of everything." Lily and Ethan exchanged troubled glances. "Your mom sounds like she was really smart and really kind," Lily said softly. Ethan nodded, tears welling in his eyes, as he touched the handwriting on the page, his only tangible connection to the mother he couldn't remember. Their exploration continued, with Lily helping Ethan navigate the wheelchair through the narrow spaces between workbenches. At the back of the greenhouse, they discovered a locked cabinet. Using a paperclip, Lily managed to pick the simple lock, a skill she'd learned from watching too many detective shows. Inside, they found rows of glass vials containing amber liquid meticulously labeled with dates and dosages. What shocked them both was the label on the front of each vial, "Ethan's treatment." Even more disturbing was the chronology. The dates extended years after Victoria's death, with the most recent vial dated just 1 month earlier. "How can these be from your mom if she died 8 years ago?" Lily whispered, a chill running down her spine despite the greenhouse's warmth. Before Ethan could respond, they heard voices approaching outside. Panic seized them both as they recognized Maxwell's deep baritone and another man's unfamiliar voice. "The greenhouse has been her sanctuary for years," Maxwell was saying. "Complete privacy to continue her work without academic constraints or government regulation." "And the results?" the stranger asked. "Remarkable. The potential applications extend far beyond medical use, which is why your investment group would find this particularly valuable," Maxwell replied. "The pharmaceutical applications alone could generate billions, but the military and private security possibilities are truly unlimited." With nowhere to run, Lily quickly shut the cabinet and helped Ethan maneuver under a large workbench draped with a cloth. They huddled together in the cramped space as the greenhouse door opened and footsteps approached. Through a small gap in the cloth, they could see Maxwell's polished Italian leather shoes and another pair of expensive loafers. "My wife's neural inhibitor formula was revolutionary." Maxwell continued, unaware of the hidden audience. "Selective targeted paralysis with no trace in standard toxicology screens. Imagine the applications, from battlefield management to crowd control to more discreet private uses." The investor chuckled appreciatively. "And you've maintained exclusive control of the research," absolutely, Maxwell confirmed. "Victoria's death was unfortunate, but it allowed me complete ownership of her work. The patents are secure, and we've been refining the formula for years. We're nearly ready for the final testing phase before seeking FDA approval for the treatment version." "And the boy?" the investor asked. "A necessary coverage," Maxwell replied callously. "His condition provides the perfect explanation for Victoria's continued absence from the scientific community." Few question why a grieving widower would become obsessed with paralysis research after losing his wife during the birth of his paralyzed son. It's the perfect narrative. Lily felt Ethan stiffen beside her, his breathing becoming shallow with shock. She squeezed his hand in silent support as they continued to eavesdrop. "We've kept him on a carefully managed dosage protocol since infancy," Maxwell explained clinically. "Enough to maintain the paralysis without causing permanent damage. Once we go to market, his miraculous recovery will be our most powerful testimonial." "Genius," the investor murmured appreciatively. "Your wife would be impressed with how you've developed her work." A flash of something, anger, guilt, crossed Maxwell's face. Victoria lacked vision. She wanted to give the formula away, make it accessible to all. She never understood the business realities. As the men continued their tour of the facility, Ethan accidentally bumped against the workbench leg, causing a small glass vial on the surface above to wobble and fall, shattering on the concrete floor. The sound, though slight, was enough to alert Maxwell. "What was that?" he demanded, turning sharply toward the workbench. Lily's heart hammered in her chest as the footsteps approached their hiding place. The cloth began to lift, and she closed her eyes, bracing for discovery. The moment of truth had arrived, and there was nowhere left to hide. The cloth was yanked away, exposing Lily and Ethan huddled beneath the workbench. Maxwell's face transformed from confusion to shock to murderous rage in the span of seconds. "What the hell are you doing here?" he roared, reaching down to drag Ethan roughly from their hiding place. Lily scrambled out after him, placing herself protectively between father and son. "Don't hurt him, we know what you've been doing," she shouted, her small frame vibrating with fear and defiance. Maxwell's investor backed away, murmuring about checking on the other guests before hastily exiting the greenhouse. Alone with the children, Maxwell's carefully maintained facade crumbled completely. "You stupid, interfering little brat," he snarled at Lily, his handsome features contorted with fury. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" He turned to Ethan, who was shaking uncontrollably in his wheelchair. "And you, my own son, conspiring against me. After everything I've done for you," Ethan, finding courage he never knew he possessed, looked his father directly in the eyes. "You've been keeping me paralyzed," he said, his voice trembling but clear. "Mom's journals say she found a cure, but you've been giving me something to keep me sick instead." Maxwell's laugh was cold and dismissive. What an active imagination you have. Your mother's death clearly affected your mind, as well as your body. His eyes darted to the open cabinet of medication vials, and his expression hardened. You've been through a traumatic experience, Ethan. Clearly you're confused and upset. We'll need to adjust your medication. He pulled out his phone and began dialing security. Lily desperately grabbed one of Victoria's journals, flipping to the incriminating entries. It's all here in your wife's handwriting. She knew someone was tampering with her research. Was that you? Did you do something to her too? For a moment, raw panic flashed across Maxwell's face before he regained control. Security, this is Blackwood, Mrs. Washington's daughter has trespassed in a restricted area and is upsetting my son. Find Mrs. Washington immediately and have her removed from the property. Consider her employment terminated. He ended the call and fixed Lily with a glacial stare. You have exactly 2 hours to collect your belongings and leave my estate. If you're still here after that, I'll have you both arrested for trespassing. Lily clutched the journal tightly. I'm taking this with me as proof of what you did. Maxwell moved with surprising speed for a man his size, twisting the journal from her grasp with such force that Lily cried out in pain. Proof of what exactly? He ripped pages from the journal and crumpled them in his fist. These are nothing but the deranged scribblings of an overworked scientist, worthless notes that mean nothing. He continued destroying the journal, tearing out pages and throwing them into a nearby sink before turning on the water to reduce them to pulp. No, Ethan cried, watching their evidence disappear. Stop it. Maxwell ignored his son's pleas, his movements methodical as he destroyed the evidence. When he finished with the journal Lily had found, he swept several more from the shelf and subjected them to the same treatment. You will never see my son again, he informed Lily with terrifying calm. If you or your mother ever speak a word about what you imagine happened here, I will ensure you regret it for the rest of your lives. Within the hour, Rosetta was summoned from the gala and informed of her termination. White-faced with shock and humiliation, she was forced to gather their belongings, while the other staff members looked on with a mixture of pity and relief that it wasn't them. Maxwell stood in the entrance hall, watching coldly, as mother and daughter were escorted to the service gate by security. Mr. Blackwood, please. Rosetta attempted one final appeal. My daughter is just a child. Whatever she did, save your breath, Mrs. Washington. Maxwell cut her off. Consider yourself fortunate that I'm not pressing charges for trespassing and attempted theft. Your final check will be mailed minus damages for the destroyed property in the greenhouse. He turned to his head of security. Ensure they're both added to the permanent blacklist. They are never to set foot on this property again. With that, he returned to his guests, smoothly explaining the minor disturbance as a regrettable staffing issue before championing his foundation's work for underprivileged children with physical disabilities. The irony was lost on his wealthy admirers, who applauded his philanthropy and compassion. Meanwhile, Rosetta and Lily found themselves on the street with 4 hastily packed suitcases containing all their worldly possessions. With limited savings and no immediate prospects, they were forced to move into a cramped one-bedroom apartment in the rundown east side of town, the only place they could afford without a security deposit. The building was dilapidated with unreliable heating and suspicious dark patches of mold on the bathroom ceiling. Their new landlord made his prejudices clear during the hurried lease signing, informing Rosetta that he didn't usually rent to their kind, but was making an exception due to the cash payment. For the first time in her life, Lily experienced the harsh realities of poverty and discrimination that her mother had worked so hard to shield her from. At her new school, she was one of only a handful of black students facing suspicious looks from teachers and taunts from classmates about her second-hand clothes and charity case status. But through it all, Lily couldn't forget what she had discovered at the Blackwood estate. Each night, she would tell her mother more details about Victoria's journals and the conversation they'd overheard between Maxwell and his investor. Though exhausted from days spent fruitlessly searching for new employment, Rosetta began to piece together the disturbing puzzle. If what you heard is true, she whispered one night as they huddled under a thin blanket to save on heating costs, then Ethan has been medically abused his entire life. and Victoria Blackwood might not be dead at all. Back at the Blackwood estate, Ethan found himself virtually imprisoned in his suite of rooms. His wheelchair was removed for repairs, leaving him confined to his bed. The friendly nurse who had cared for him for years was replaced by a stern-faced man named Brendan, who never left his side, even during bathroom visits. Most disturbingly, his father had engaged a new physician, Dr. Sebastian Webb, who arrived daily to administer injections that left Ethan disoriented and increasingly nauseous. These new treatments will help manage your condition more effectively. Dr. 72. Webb explained with a smile that never reached his eyes. Your father is very concerned about your recent episodes. Ethan knew what the doctor really meant. Since learning the truth in the greenhouse, he had begun secretly spitting out his vitamins rather than swallowing them. Within days, he'd started experiencing strange sensations in his supposedly paralyzed limbs, tingles, twitches, and sometimes even the ability to wiggle his toes when no one was watching. One morning, gathering his courage, Ethan had mentioned these developments to his father during their now daily check-in. Dad, something's happening with my legs. I can feel them sometimes. What if I'm getting better? The flash of panic that crossed Maxwell's face confirmed everything Lily had discovered. Within hours, Dr. Webb had arrived with his new treatment protocol, and the constant supervision had begun. Through the haze of medication, Ethan struggled to maintain his sense of self and the newfound hope that had blossomed during his friendship with Lily. He began secretly refusing the pills again, pretending to swallow them before hiding them in a slit he'd made in his mattress. It was more difficult to avoid the injections, but occasionally he managed to loosen the tourniquet when Dr. Webb wasn't looking, causing most of the medication to miss his vein. These small acts of rebellion came with a price, withdrawal symptoms that left him sweating and trembling at night, but also with a reward, increasingly strong sensations in his legs, and eventually the ability to move them slightly when lured alone. Meanwhile, Rosetta discovered the true extent of Maxwell Blackwood's influence in Westlake. Every application she submitted for employment was mysteriously rejected, even positions for which she was overqualified. Former colleagues at the Blackwood estate wouldn't return her calls. The few interviews she managed to secure ended abruptly when employers realized her connection to the Blackwood family. I'm sorry, but we can't afford to antagonize someone with Mr. Blackwood's connections, one sympathetic restaurant manager explained after pulling her application from the stack. He sits on half the boards in town and has invested in most of the businesses. We just can't risk it. Desperate, and increasingly concerned about what was happening to Ethan, Rosetta attempted to report her suspicions to Child Protective Services. Armed with Lily's detailed account of what they'd discovered, she spent 2 hours explaining the situation to a disinterested social worker who took sparse notes and repeatedly checked the time. 1 week later, she received a form letter stating that after thorough investigation, no evidence of abuse or neglect had been found at the Blackwood residence. When Rosetta called to follow up, the supervisor coldly informed her that making false reports was a serious offense, especially when motivated by revenge for termination due to misconduct. It became painfully clear that Maxwell had ensured their voices would not be heard through official channels. But Lily refused to give up on her friend. "Mom, we have to help Ethan," she insisted night after night. "No one believes us because we don't have proof. We need to find evidence that even Mr. Blackwood can't make disappear." Rosetta stroked her daughter's hair, torn between pride in her determination and fear for their safety. "Lily, we have to be very careful. Mr. Blackwood is powerful and dangerous. We need to be smart about how we approach this." What neither of them realized was that their determination would soon be tested in ways they couldn't imagine, as the stakes in their battle against Maxwell Blackwood were about to become much higher and much more personal. Have you ever noticed how the tiniest objects can sometimes hold the biggest secrets? How something as small as a locket might contain a truth powerful enough to shatter lives and rebuild them anew, 3 weeks after their expulsion from the pastorate. Blackwood estate Lily still couldn't shake the feeling that Ethan was in escalating danger. She'd taken to riding her second-hand bicycle past the estate's imposing iron gates each day, after school, hoping for a glimpse of her friend or some way to communicate with him. On a particularly chilly October evening, as sunset painted the Connecticut sky in hues of amber and gold, Lily's persistence was rewarded with an unexpected sight. From her hiding spot behind a large oak tree across from the service entrance, she observed Maxwell Blackwood and an unfamiliar man in work clothes making their way toward the abandoned garden where Victoria's greenhouse stood. Maxwell carried a small box tucked under his arm, his posture rigid with tension. Intrigued, Lily followed at a safe distance, using the lengthening shadows as cover. The men bypassed the greenhouse instead, stopping in a barren patch of soil near the garden's northern edge. As Lily watched, the worker began digging a hole while Maxwell stood by, impatiently checking his watch repeatedly. After several minutes, Maxwell placed the box in the freshly dug hole, said something inaudible to the worker, and then both men covered the mysterious package with dirt before Maxwell tamped it down with his expensive shoe. Once they departed, heading in opposite directions, Lily waited an agonizing 20 minutes to ensure they wouldn't return. Her heart pounding like a drum in her chest, she approached the disturbed earth. Whatever Maxwell had buried must be important, or incriminating. Using a flat stone as an improvised shovel, Lily dug frantically, her small hands growing dirty and scraped as she worked. The autumn air bit at her fingers, but determination warmed her from within. Finally, her makeshift tool struck something solid. Brushing away the remaining soil, she uncovered a small wooden box with tarnished brass fittings. With trembling hands, Lily pried it open. Inside, nestled on faded velvet, lay a silver locket on a delicate chain. The antique piece was ornately engraved with intertwining vines and the initials V.B., Victoria Blackwood. Lily carefully lifted the locket from its resting place, turning it over in her palm. It took several attempts with her dirt-encrusted fingernails to release the tiny clasp, but when the locket finally opened, she gasped audibly. On one side was a miniature photograph of a beautiful woman with golden hair and gentle eyes, undoubtedly Ethan's mother. She was smiling radiantly while holding an infant that could only be Ethan. But it was the inscription on the opposite side that sent a chill down Lily's spine: Victoria and Ethan 8 months after miracle. The date stamped below the inscription was clearly visible, more than 8 months after Victoria Blackwood had supposedly died in childbirth. With fingers now shaking from more than just the cold, Lily examined the locket more carefully and discovered a nearly invisible seam along its edge. Pressing carefully, a hidden compartment sprang open, revealing a tiny key, unlike any she'd seen before. Too small for a door, too oddly shaped for a padlock. Pocketing both the locket and the mysterious key, Lily refilled the hole as best she could and slipped away from the estate, her mind racing with questions and possibilities. That evening, huddled in their tiny apartment kitchen, while Rosetta prepared a meager dinner of rice and beans, Lily revealed her discovery. "Mom, look what I found buried on the Blackwood property," she whispered, placing the silver locket on the scratched formica table. Rosetta's eyes widened as she examined the photograph and date. "This can't be possible," she murmured, turning the locket over repeatedly as if expecting the inscription to change. Victoria Blackwood's death was in all the papers. There was a funeral. I started working there just after it happened. What if it was all fake? Lily pressed. What if Mr. Blackwood did something to her because of her research? Remember what we heard him tell that investor, that her death let him control everything. Rosetta sank into a chair, the implications overwhelming her. If this is real, then Maxwell Blackwood has been lying about his wife's death for 8 years. But why would he keep his own son paralyzed? What kind of monster would do that to his own child? The question hung heavy in the air between them. "We need help," Mom Lily said finally. "Someone who'll believe us, even though we're pert," she trailed off, not wanting to finish the thought. "Even though we're black and poor and Mr. Blackwood is white and rich." Rosetta completed softly, facing the reality they both understood all too well. "You're right. But who can we trust?" After much deliberation, they decided to approach Lily's new teacher, Miss Daniels, a young woman who had shown kindness to Lily, despite her troublemaker reputation at school. Unlike many others in Westlake Miss Tratter, their Restlake Miss Tractor is Wertain. Daniels had recently moved to town and had no connections to the Blackwood family or businesses. The next day after class, Lily timidly approached Miss Eight, Daniels' desk, and shared a carefully edited version of their situation, focusing on their concern for Ethan's welfare, rather than the more outlandish claims about Victoria possibly being alive. To their surprise and relief, Miss Daniels listened attentively, asking thoughtful questions without judgment. "This is a very serious situation, Lily," she said finally. "If what you're suggesting is true, Ethan could be in real danger. But we need more evidence before we can help him." When Lily mentioned needing to return to the estate to check on something important, Miss Daniels hesitated but ultimately agreed to drive her there. After school, the following day, under the pretense of retrieving some belongings Rosetta had left behind. Meanwhile, Rosetta put her nursing background to good use. Before being forced into domestic work due to discrimination in healthcare, she had trained as a registered nurse. Now she contacted an old colleague who still worked at Westlake General Hospital, convincing him to analyze a pill identical to those Ethan had been taking, one that Lily had pocketed during their last visit. The results confirmed their worst fears. The vitamins contained a compound that temporarily inhibited nerve signals to muscles, essentially causing a reversible form of paralysis. Even more disturbing, Rosetta's friend discovered through a database search that Maxwell Blackwood held a patent for a similar compound filed 6 years earlier and potentially worth billions if approved for selective medical applications. A euphemism whose sinister implications were not lost on either of them. Would you believe a child and a former housekeeper over one of the wealthiest and most respected men in town? Comment number 1. If you think most people would dismiss their claims as fantasy, or number 2, if you believe the truth would eventually come to light. Like this video if you've ever discovered something that changed your entire understanding of a situation. Subscribe to follow this shocking story to its conclusion and discover what happens when the powerless stand up against corruption. The following afternoon, true to her word, Miss Daniels drove Lily to the Blackwood estate. While the teacher engaged the security guard in conversation, asking about the procedure for returning employee belongings, Lily slipped away toward Victoria's garden. The tiny key from the locket burned in her pocket as she approached the greenhouse, but something told her the key wasn't meant for any lock she'd seen there before. Examining the structure more carefully, Lily noticed what she'd missed during her previous visits: a small decorative panel near the foundation that seemed out of place among the Victorian ironwork. Heart racing, she pressed against it, and to her amazement, the panel slid aside to reveal a keyhole. The tiny key from the locket fit perfectly. With a soft click, a section of the greenhouse floor slid away, exposing a narrow staircase descending into darkness below. Gathering her courage, Lily pulled the small flashlight from her backpack and began her descent into the unknown. The stairs led to a surprisingly modern underground room, a bunker of sorts with advanced equipment lining the walls and a hospital-style bed in the center. Startled by movement, Lily swung her flashlight toward the corner, illuminating a thin woman with long blonde hair streaked with gray. Though gaunt and pale, her features were unmistakably those of the woman from the locket photo, Victoria Blackwood, very much alive. "Who are you?" Victoria asked, her voice hoarse from disuse. "How did you find me?" Lily approached, slowly explaining who she was and her friendship with Ethan. As understanding dawned on Victoria's face, 8 years of isolation crumbled her composure. Tears streamed down her hollow cheeks as she learned about her son. The boy, she'd been told, had died shortly after she was imprisoned. "Maxwell told me Ethan didn't survive," she whispered, hands trembling. "He said the formula had killed our baby, and he was keeping me here to perfect it to atone for what I'd done." The horrifying truth emerged as Victoria shared her story. Years ago, while developing neural regeneration treatments, she discovered Maxwell was secretly testing experimental compounds on poor communities of color through his pharmaceutical company's charitable clinics. When she threatened to expose him, he orchestrated her death during childbirth, faking Ethan's paralysis to explain her absence from the scientific community. He'd kept her imprisoned in this hidden lab, forcing her to continue research while using her son's condition as both explanation and leverage. "He's been keeping Ethan paralyzed with derivatives of my own work," Victoria explained, her voice breaking. "Using my research meant to heal to instead cause harm. All while profiting from both sides. The paralysis-inducing compounds for military applications and the potential cure for those who could afford it." She had been secretly developing an antidote, but couldn't escape without endangering the son she believed barely alive. Using Lily's phone, Victoria recorded her testimony and transferred formulas for the antidote and evidence of Maxwell's crimes. As footsteps sounded above them, Victoria urgently pressed a small vial into Lily's hand. "This will help Ethan's body clear the toxins faster. Now go. If Maxwell finds you here, we're both in danger." Lily escaped through an old drainage pipe moments before security discovered the open bunker entrance. Running to Miss Daniel's waiting car, she clutched the phone containing Victoria's confession and the precious vial that could free Ethan from his chemical prison. But as they drove away, Lily looked back to see Maxwell's security team surrounding the greenhouse, and her heart sank with the realization that Victoria had likely been recaptured. The race to save both mother and son had just become much more urgent and infinitely more dangerous. With trembling hands, Lily showed the video evidence to her mother and Miss Daniels in their tiny apartment kitchen. Victoria Blackwood's haggard face filled the phone screen as she detailed years of abuse, exploitation, and imprisonment at her husband's hands. The evidence was damning. Maxwell had faked his wife's death, kept her prisoner to exploit her research, paralyzed his own son with chemicals, and built a pharmaceutical empire on suffering and lies. "We need to take this to the authorities immediately," Miss Daniels urged, her face pale with shock. Rosetta shook her head, her expression grim. "It's not that simple. Maxwell Blackwood owns half this town. The police chief plays golf with him every Sunday. The mayor attended his wedding." She paced the small kitchen, weighing their options. "We need someone with power who isn't in his pocket, someone who can't be bought or intimidated." After hours of discussion, they settled on District Attorney Eleanor Chen, a recently elected official who had campaigned on anti-corruption platforms and had no known ties to the Blackwood enterprises. Getting an appointment proved challenging. As a former household employee with discrimination complaints, Rosetta was easily dismissed by gatekeepers. Finally, Miss Daniels used her position as a teacher, expressing concern about potential child abuse, to secure a 15-minute slot in the DA's busy schedule. The meeting began poorly. District Attorney Chen, an imposing woman with a reputation for efficiency, glanced at her watch repeatedly as Rosetta outlined their allegations. "Mrs. Washington." She interrupted after less than 5 minutes. "These are extraordinarily serious accusations against one of our community's most respected citizens. Do you have any actual evidence beyond the testimony of a 7-year-old girl?" Her tone made it clear she expected the answer to be no. Instead, Lily carefully placed the silver locket on the DA's desk, followed by the phone containing Victoria's video testimony. "We have this," she said quietly. Eleanor Chen's professional demeanor cracked slightly as she examined the dated photograph of a very much alive Victoria Blackwood holding baby Ethan. When she played the video and heard Victoria's desperate account of her imprisonment, the DA's expression transformed completely. "I recognize this woman," she said slowly. "Before I went to law school, I studied biochemistry. Victoria Blackwood was brilliant. Her papers on neural regeneration were groundbreaking. Everyone in the field was shocked when she died so suddenly." She looked up at Rosetta and Lily with new respect. "This changes everything. But building a case against someone with Maxwell Blackwood's resources won't be easy. We'll need to move carefully to ensure both Victoria and Ethan's safety." D.A. Chen explained that while she would immediately begin organizing a task force to investigate, gathering sufficient evidence for warrants would take time, possibly weeks. "He's hurting Ethan right now," Lily protested. "And who knows what he'll do to Victoria after finding the bunker open. We don't have weeks." The DA's expression was sympathetic but firm. "I understand your urgency, but rushing in without proper legal groundwork could result in Maxwell walking free. We need to build an airtight case, As they left the DA's office with promises of action but no immediate relief, Rosetta and Lily felt the weight of time pressing down on them. Their fears were confirmed that evening when Lily received a frantic text message from an unknown number. "They're moving me and Mom tonight. Dad says we're going to the island. I found an old tablet and hid it. Please help." It could only be from Ethan, and the message confirmed their worst fears. Maxwell was planning to flee with his captives. Their time had run out. "We need to do something now, Mom," Lily insisted, close to tears. Ethan and his mom could disappear forever. Rosetta sat in silence for long moments, her face a mask of concentration. Finally, she reached for her phone and dialed a number she hadn't called in years. "Marcus, it's Rosetta. I know it's been a long time, but our daughter needs your help." Marcus Johnson had once been a security specialist for high-profile clients before meeting and falling in love with Rosetta during an assignment in Connecticut. Their relationship had blossomed and resulted in Lily, but Maxwell Blackwood, then merely a client of Marcus's firm, had intervened. Uncomfortable with his security specialist, dating a black woman, Maxwell had used his influence to have Marcus reassigned across the country, then spread rumors about Rosetta's promiscuity that prevented her from advancing beyond household staff. The relationship had crumbled under the pressure, with Marcus eventually building a new life in California, sending child support but maintaining minimal contact with his daughter. Now faced with Lily in danger, Marcus didn't hesitate. "I'll be on the next flight," he promised. While waiting for Marcus to arrive, they received disturbing news through Rosetta's hospital contact. Security at Westlake General had been doubled overnight after an unauthorized attempt to access Victoria Blackwood's supposed autopsy records. More troublingly, a nurse who had helped analyze Ethan's medication had been fired for privacy violations and escorted from the premises. Maxwell was clearly tying up loose ends and eliminating potential evidence. When Marcus arrived the following morning, the tension between him and Rosetta was palpable. 8 years of separation and hurt feelings, creating an invisible wall between them. But those concerns took a backseat to the urgent situation at hand. A tall, powerfully built man with the alert eyes of someone accustomed to assessing threats, Marcus listened intently as they brought him up to speed on the situation. "I've dealt with Maxwell Blackwood before," he said, grimly after reviewing all their evidence. "He's ruthless and methodical. If he's planning to move his family to his private island in the Bahamas, we have a very narrow window to act." Drawing on his security background, Marcus outlined a plan. The Blackwood estate security system had likely been upgraded since he'd last worked with the family, but he knew the property layout intimately. Through contacts in his former profession, he discovered that Maxwell had scheduled his private jet for departure at midnight from a small airport outside Westlake. They would have one chance to intervene before Ethan and Victoria disappeared forever. Using specialized equipment from his security days, Marcus engineered a focused electromagnetic pulse device that would temporarily disable the estate's electronic security systems without triggering backup protocols. Daniels agreed to contact D.A. Chen, with their plan ensuring law enforcement would be ready to move in once they had confirmed Victoria and Ethan's presence. As dusk fell over Westlake, their unlikely rescue team gathered in Rosetta's apartment for final preparations. Marcus reviewed the estate blueprints one last time, highlighting potential entry points and escape routes. Rosetta packed medical supplies to treat any injuries and the antidote Victoria had developed. Lily, despite the adults' concerns, insisted on accompanying them. She was the only one Ethan would immediately trust, and she knew the secret passages of the mansion better than anyone. "This is incredibly dangerous," Marcus warned his daughter, still struggling to reconcile the determined young girl before him with the baby he'd left years ago. "If anything happens to you—" "Nothing will happen," Lily interrupted with quiet confidence. "We're going to save Ethan and his mom because it's the right thing to do. Sometimes kids have to be brave when adults won't listen." Her words hung in the air, a powerful indictment of the systems that had failed to protect the vulnerable in favor of the powerful. As they drove toward the Blackwood estate under cover of darkness, the car was filled with tense silence. Each person was absorbed in their own thoughts. Rosetta, praying for her daughter's safety, Marcus calculating risks and contingencies, and Lily clutching the silver locket that had started them down this dangerous path. Little did they know that within the walls of the mansion, events were already unfolding that would make their rescue attempt even more perilous. Maxwell, increasingly paranoid as his carefully constructed world began crumbling, had doubled his security team and armed them with explicit instructions to neutralize any intruders without hesitation. Meanwhile, Ethan, suffering painful withdrawal symptoms as the paralysis drugs left his system, was experiencing increasing sensation and movement in his legs, changes he carefully concealed from his captors. And deep beneath the greenhouse, Victoria Blackwood had been returned to her underground prison, but now with the knowledge that her son was alive and in danger, knowledge that filled her with both desperate hope and terrible resolve. The stage was set for a confrontation that would either bring justice to the Blackwood family or condemn them to a lifetime of suffering at the hands of a man who valued power and profit above all else. The autumn night draped its dark cloak over the Blackwood estate, as three shadowy figures made their way through the dense woods bordering the property. Marcus, using night vision equipment, led the way with Rosetta and Lily, following closely behind. The security expert had timed their approach to coincide with the shift change he'd identified through careful observation earlier that day, a 7-minute window when coverage of the eastern perimeter would be at its weakest. "Remember the plan," Marcus whispered as they paused at the tree line. "I'll trigger the EMP to disable the electronics. We have exactly 20 minutes before the backup systems engage. Rosetta, you head for the greenhouse to find Victoria. Lily and I will locate Ethan." Rosetta nodded, her nurse's bag containing medical supplies slung across her chest. Despite their years apart, the familiar competence in Marcus's voice reassured her. This was the man she had fallen in love with, decisive, capable, protective. Lily clutched the small vial of antidote Victoria had given her, now carefully divided into 2 doses. Her heart hammered against her ribs, but her determination remained unshaken. This was for Ethan, her friend who had suffered his entire life because of his father's greed. With a silent countdown, Marcus activated the EMP device. For a moment, nothing seemed to happen. Then the subtle electronic hum that permeated the property fell silent. Security lights flickered and died, plunging the estate into darkness. Even the distant buzz of surveillance cameras ceased. Now Marcus urged, and they sprinted across the open ground to the service entrance Rosetta had used for years. The door, its electronic lock disabled, yielded to Marcus's specialized tools in seconds. They slipped inside the familiar service corridor, eerily quiet without the usual staff presence. "This way to the greenhouse," Rosetta whispered, pointing to a side exit. "Be careful." With a quick embrace of her daughter, she disappeared into the darkness, moving with the confidence of someone who had navigated these passages countless times. Marcus and Lily continued deeper into the mansion, using the servants' passages to avoid the main halls where security would likely be concentrated. From his intelligence gathering, Marcus knew Ethan would be kept in the East Wing, probably under guard, given the family's imminent departure. As they approached the residential section, voices echoed from around the corner, security personnel responding to the power disruption. "Something's wrong with the system," a gruff voice complained. "Backup isn't engaging properly. Mr. Blackwood wants the boy ready for transport in 30 minutes, another responded. "Power or no power, we need to secure him now." Marcus pulled Lily into a narrow linen closet as heavy footsteps passed their hiding place. Once the corridor cleared, they continued toward Ethan's rooms, moving with increased urgency. The 20-minute window was rapidly closing. Meanwhile, Rosetta had made her way to the overgrown garden, using the darkness as cover. The greenhouse loomed before her, its glass panels reflecting the faint moonlight. The entrance to Victoria's underground prison had been sealed with a new padlock, but Rosetta came prepared. Using bolt cutters from her bag, she made quick work of the obstruction and descended the narrow staircase, flashlight in hand. The bunker was empty. Victoria's bed was rumpled, medical equipment scattered as if she had been removed in a hurry. A single sheet of paper lay on the pillow, covered in hurried handwriting. "They're moving me to the house. Ethan needs the full dose of antidote. Maxwell plans to eliminate all evidence. Be careful. He's desperate now. Rosetta's blood ran cold at the implications. She had to warn Marcus and Lily that the situation was even more dangerous than they'd anticipated. In the main house, Maxwell Blackwood paced his study fury, radiating from every movement. The power outage had delayed their departure schedule, and he suspected it was no accident. "Find out what's happening with the security system," he barked into a satellite phone, one of the few devices still functioning, "and bring my wife up from the guest room. We're leaving in 20 minutes. Power or no power." Across the mansion in the East Wing, Ethan lay on his bed pretending to be sedated while secretly observing the chaos around him. The two security guards assigned to transport him were arguing about the best route to the helipad given the disabled elevators. Through half-closed eyes, Ethan watched them check their weapons, an alarming development that confirmed his father's desperation. Something had spooked Maxwell badly enough to abandon the careful pretense he'd maintained for years. A soft scratching at the door, adjoining the bathroom, caught Ethan's attention. The guards still arguing about logistics didn't notice as the door inched open to reveal Lily's face. She placed a finger to her lips, then pointed to someone behind her. A tall man Ethan didn't recognize. The man held up 3 fingers, then 2, then 1. The bathroom door burst open as Marcus charged into the room, using the element of surprise to quickly overcome one guard. The second reached for his weapon, but Rosetta, who had rejoined them after finding the empty bunker, appeared from the hallway and struck him from behind with a fire extinguisher. The guard crumpled to the floor unconscious. "Ethan, we're here to rescue you," Lily cried, rushing to her friend's bedside. "Can you move at all?" To her amazement, Ethan swung his legs off the bed with visible effort. "A little," he gasped. "I've been pretending to take the medicine. I can feel my legs, but they're still weak. This will help," Lily said, producing the vial of antidote. "Your mom made it for you." "She's alive, Ethan." Tears streamed down the boy's face as he swallowed the liquid. "I know. Dad was arguing with someone on the phone. I heard him say, 'She stays sedated until we reach the island.' I knew he meant Mom." Marcus quickly bound and gagged the unconscious guards, then helped Ethan into a lightweight wheelchair they'd brought. "We need to find Victoria and get out of here fast. Our window is closing." Rosetta shared what she'd discovered in the bunker. "She's being kept in the guest suite heavily guarded. Maxwell is planning to destroy evidence, which likely includes us if we're caught." The rescue party moved through the darkened corridors, avoiding the main hallways where security teams were now conducting sweeps with flashlights. Their progress was painfully slow, with Ethan's wheelchair forcing them to take longer, less direct routes to avoid detection. The guest suite was located in the West Wing, requiring them to cross the mansion's central atrium, a dangerous open space they'd hoped to avoid. As they approached the atrium, voices echoed from multiple directions, security teams converging on their position. They found the guards, Marcus whispered, recognizing the urgent radio chatter. "We're out of options. We need to make a run for it." Before they could move, the mansion's backup generators finally engaged, flooding the atrium with light and exposing them completely. Alarms blared throughout the building as Marcus pushed Ethan's wheelchair at a sprint across the open space, Rosetta and Lily running alongside. Security personnel shouted behind them, and the distinctive sound of weapons being drawn echoed off the marble floors. "Halt or we'll shoot," a voice commanded as they reached the West Wing corridor. Marcus pushed Ethan's wheelchair into Rosetta's hands. "Get them to the guest suite. Find Victoria. I'll hold them off." Before Rosetta could protest, he turned to face the approaching security team, hands raised in apparent surrender. As the guards approached, Marcus activated a flashbang grenade from his tactical vest, temporarily blinding and disorienting their pursuers. The distraction bought precious minutes for Rosetta, Lily, and Ethan to continue toward the guest suite. The racial dynamics of the confrontation became painfully clear as they encountered staff members in the West Wing. Some, recognizing Rosetta and remembering Maxwell's harsh treatment of minorities, pointed them toward the guest suite with silent nods. Others, particularly those who had benefited from the household's inequitable structure, attempted to block their path or alert security to their location. "They're trying to kidnap Mr. Blackwood's son," one white housekeeper shouted into her radio. "These people are dangerous. The dehumanizing language wasn't lost on Rosetta, who had faced similar prejudice throughout her time at the estate. When they finally reached the guest suite, they found it guarded by a single security officer, younger than the others and visibly nervous. Recognizing an opportunity, Rosetta approached him directly, her hands visible. "That woman in there isn't a guest," she said calmly. When he finally emerged, locking the door securely behind him, his expression was unreadable, but his movements seemed oddly hurried. Something compelled Lily to continue her surveillance. She tracked Maxwell back to the main house, where he immediately locked himself in his study. Pressing her ear against the door, she caught fragments of a phone conversation that made little sense to her. The formula remained stable. "Yes, everything continues according to plan." Behind him, Ethan spoke up, his voice stronger than before, as the antidote began working. "Please let me see my mother. She's alive, and my father has been keeping her prisoner to steal her research." The guard hesitated, his weapon lowering slightly. In that moment of indecision, Marcus appeared at the end of the hall, having evaded or neutralized their pursuers. The guard, startled by the new arrival, made a fatal mistake. He turned away from Rosetta, giving her the opening to disable him with a precise strike to a pressure point she remembered from her nursing training. With the guard unconscious, they rushed into the suite to find Victoria Blackwood lying on a bed, groggy from sedatives but conscious. The reunion between mother and son was brief but powerful, both crying as they embraced for the first time in 8 years. "We have to move," Marcus urged, helping Victoria to her feet. "Security is regrouping, and Maxwell will be looking for all of you." As if summoned by his name, Maxwell Blackwood's voice came over the mansion's intercom system. "Attention, intruders. You are surrounded. There is no escape. Return my family immediately, and perhaps we can negotiate your safe passage out of this situation." The cold calculation in his tone made it clear no such negotiation would actually occur. "She's Victoria Blackwood, and she's being held against her will. You're participating in a kidnapping." The young guard's eyes widened with uncertainty. "Mrs. Blackwood died years ago. Everyone knows that." "Then who is the woman you're guarding?" Rosetta challenged. "Why is she kept sedated? Why are you taking her to a private island in the middle of the night?" Doubt flickered across the guard's face. What they didn't know was that Maxwell himself was already on the roof, having anticipated their plan. As they emerged onto the helipad, the full moon illuminated a scene straight from a nightmare. Maxwell Blackwood standing beside the helicopter, holding a gun to his son's head. 6 months later, the Westlake County Courthouse buzzed with tension as spectators filled every available seat for the final day of testimony in what the media had dubbed the trial of the century. Camera crews lined the courthouse steps, and reporters from around the world jostled for position, all eager to capture the culmination of a case that had exposed corruption and cruelty at the highest levels of privilege and power. Inside the packed courtroom, 8-year-old Ethan Blackwood sat tall and straight on the witness stand, without a wheelchair for the first time in his public life. Dressed in a crisp blue suit that matched his eyes, he spoke with remarkable composure as he recounted the years of medical abuse he had endured at his father's hands. "My earliest memories are of feeling foggy and weak," he testified, his clear voice carrying throughout the hushed room. "Every morning and night I had to take pills that my father said would help me. Now I know they were actually making me sick, keeping me paralyzed when I could have been running and playing like other kids." At the defense table, Maxwell Blackwood maintained the same impassive expression he'd worn throughout the trial. His tailored prison jumpsuit, a jarring contrast to the bespoke suits he'd once worn. Only the occasional muscle twitch in his jaw betrayed his inner turmoil as his carefully constructed empire of lies collapsed around him. The dramatic events on the helipad that October night had permanently shattered his veneer of respectability. Cornered and desperate, Maxwell had held his own son hostage, revealing the full extent of his scheme to the small group who had come to rescue Ethan and Victoria. "You have no idea what you're interfering with," he'd snarled, the gun pressed against Ethan's temple as the helicopter's rotors whipped the night air around them. "Do you know what this research is worth? The military applications alone would revolutionize warfare. Targeted temporary paralysis with no trace. Crowd control without casualties. Interrogation without evidence." billions in contracts, and you want to throw it away for what? Sentimentality. His monologue, captured on the body camera Marcus had presciently warned, provided prosecutors with Maxwell's own unfiltered confession. When police sirens had pierced the night, D.A. Chen having mobilized law enforcement after receiving Miss Daniels' alert, Maxwell's momentary distraction had given Lily the opportunity to create a critical diversion. Throwing the silver locket toward the helicopter with all her might, she had drawn Maxwell's attention just long enough for Marcus to disarm him in a swift, practiced movement. The ensuing struggle had been brief but violent, ending with Maxwell in handcuffs and his years of crimes exposed to the authorities who had once celebrated his philanthropy. Now, as the trial neared its conclusion, Victoria Blackwood took the stand after her son, her testimony, the final piece in the prosecution's case. Though still thin from her years of captivity, Victoria had regained her strength and professional bearing. As she detailed her imprisonment, and forced research jurors visibly recoiled from the calculated cruelty she described. Maxwell discovered, "My research could be perverted to cause paralysis rather than cure it." She explained, her voice steady despite the horrific content. "When I threatened to expose his plans to weaponize and profit from my work, he drugged me, faked my death during childbirth, and kept me imprisoned for 8 years, using our son's supposed condition as both cover story and leverage to ensure my continued cooperation." Perhaps most damning was the evidence Victoria had secretly accumulated during her captivity. Detailed records of Maxwell's crimes stored on a microdrive hidden within the silver locket that Lily had discovered. The drive contained formulas, dates, communications with military contractors, and a record of Maxwell's systematic suppression of anyone who questioned Ethan's diagnosis. The prosecution's case was airtight, bolstered by testimony from former Blackwood employees, medical experts, and the financial paper trail of Maxwell's pharmaceutical patents based on Victoria's stolen research. When the jury returned after just 4 hours of deliberation, their verdict surprised no one: guilty on all counts, including kidnapping, child abuse, fraud, unlawful imprisonment, and human experimentation. Maxwell Blackwood, once celebrated as a visionary entrepreneur and philanthropist, was sentenced to 30 years in federal prison without possibility of parole. His empire dismantled his reputation, destroyed his name, now synonymous with exploitation rather than excellence. For Lily and Rosetta Washington, the aftermath of the trial brought long overdue recognition of their courage and resilience. Victoria, now head of the restructured Blackwood Foundation, appointed Rosetta as administrator of the organization, now genuinely dedicated to medical equality and accessibility rather than merely the appearance of philanthropy. Their first initiative transformed the Blackwood estate into a research and rehabilitation center where children of all backgrounds received cutting-edge treatment regardless of financial means. Marcus Johnson reconnected with his daughter through their shared ordeal, relocated permanently to Connecticut. The family that had been fractured by Maxwell's prejudice and manipulation years earlier slowly rebuilt their bonds stronger for having faced adversity together. Most remarkably, Victoria established the Lily Washington Scholarship for minority students entering medical research, ensuring the next generation wouldn't face the same barriers that had derailed Rosetta's nursing career. "Some heroes don't wear capes," Victoria announced at the scholarship's launch ceremony. "Some are 7 years old with braided hair and more courage than most adults will ever know." For Ethan and Lily, the friendship forged in secret playrooms and dangerous rescues blossomed in the light of freedom. As Ethan continued physical therapy to strengthen muscles weakened by years of chemical suppression, Lily remained by his side, encouraging each new achievement. Their bond, tested by extraordinary circumstances, became an inspiration to others, living proof that compassion could triumph over cruelty, and that truth, however buried, would eventually find its way to the surface. On a bright spring morning, exactly 1 year after the dramatic rescue, Ethan completed his first full-mile run around the track of the rehabilitation center that once been his prison. As staff, patients, and visitors erupted in applause, he sought out Lily in the crowd, their shared smile communicating what words could not, that justice, though sometimes delayed, had finally been served. The story of the billionaire's son who was born paralyzed until a poor little girl discovered the shocking truth became more than a sensational headline. It became a powerful reminder that wealth and privilege cannot forever shield the guilty from accountability, and that even the smallest voice when speaking truth can ultimately topple the mightiest fortress of lies. What would you have done in Lily's position? Would you have had the courage to stand up against someone as powerful as Maxwell Blackwood? This incredible story reminds us that sometimes the greatest heroes are those we least expect. If this story moved you, please like this video and subscribe to our channel for more extraordinary true stories of courage and justice. Share this video with someone who needs a reminder that one person, even a child, can make a profound difference when they stand up for what's right. Thank you for watching, and remember, the truth may be hidden, but it can never truly be buried forever. This story reminds us that true power lies not in wealth or status, but in courage and compassion. When systems of privilege protect the powerful at the expense of the vulnerable, it takes extraordinary bravery to challenge the established order. Lily, a 7-year-old black girl with nothing but determination and a sense of justice, stood against a billionaire whose racist systems and exploitation went unchallenged for years. Her refusal to accept injustice, even when adults around her counseled caution, serves as a powerful reminder that our moral compass should never be calibrated by our circumstances. The story also highlights how racial discrimination operates not just through overt hatred, but through subtle systemic barriers that push qualified people like Rosetta from professional careers into service roles. Maxwell's exploitation of Victoria's research parallels how privileged individuals often appropriate and profit from others' work without credit or compensation. Most importantly, this narrative teaches us that truth may be temporarily buried, but cannot be permanently hidden. No matter how elaborate the deception or how powerful its architect, justice eventually finds its path, sometimes guided by the most unlikely heroes. The bonds formed between Ethan and Lily transcended social barriers, proving that authentic human connection can flourish even in the most hostile environments. Have you ever witnessed someone abusing their power and wondered if you should speak up? What would you have done in Lily's position? Stay silent to protect yourself or risk everything to help someone in need? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Has racial discrimination touched your life or the lives of people you care about? Let us know your experiences. If this story moved you, please hit that like button to help more people discover it. Subscribe to our channel for more powerful stories that expose injustice and celebrate unlikely heroes. Share this video with someone who needs inspiration to stand up for what's right, even when facing powerful opposition. Thank you for joining us on this journey through darkness into light. And remember, one voice speaking truth can change lives forever. Until next time, keep seeking justice and creating connections that transcend society's boundaries.